Good morning, and thank you for joining us for this study of God's Word. I hope that you're doing well, and I would like to invite you to join us in services today at Pyburn Street Church of Christ. We will meet for Bible study at 9 a.m., followed by worship at 9:50. We will meet this evening at 6 p.m. for evening worship, and tonight is our monthly question and answer night. We also gather on Wednesday evenings at 6 p.m. for midweek Bible study, and we would love for you to join us for any or all of these upcoming services. As well, I invite you to join us beginning this Friday evening at 7 p.m. for a trip through the Bible. Dr. Dave Miller, the Director of Apologetics Press in Montgomery, Alabama, will be the guest speaker for this series of lessons. We will meet at 7 p.m. on Friday and Saturday evenings, at 9 and 9:50 a.m. Sunday morning, followed by a potluck lunch, and then an afternoon session at 1 p.m. We would love for you to join us for this journey through the Bible. Last week in our Sunday morning Bible study, we were studying from Luke 19 about Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem. In verses 38 and 39, we find the disciples of Jesus saying, "Blessed be the King that cometh in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest." And some of the Pharisees from among the multitude said unto him, "Master, rebuke thy disciples." And he answered and said unto them, "I tell you that, if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out." I mentioned that this statement regarding the rocks crying out is likely a foreshadowing of the earthquake which took place at the time of Jesus' death just 1 week following. And this morning, I would like for us to consider this time when the rocks indeed cried out. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Jesus, after having endured 6 hours on the cross, spoke 4 statements in rapid succession. He said, my God, why have you forsaken me?" in Matthew 27:46. He said, "I am thirsty," in John 19:28. He said, "It is finished," John 19:30. And then, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit," Luke 23:46. It is specifically said about these first and last statements that he cried out with a loud voice. Then Jesus lowered his head upon his chest and yielded up his spirit to God. Matthew's Gospel records 4 signs that immediately followed the crucifixion and substantiated the divine nature of Jesus' death. He listed the tearing of the veil of the temple from top to bottom, an earthquake that split the rocks and shook the earth, the opening of tombs around Jerusalem, along with the resurrection of many saints, and the testimony of the centurion and those with him that Jesus is God's Son. Given the fact that it was the Son of God, the second member of the Godhead who died on the cross, we should not be surprised that miraculous signs accompanied this occurrence and confirmed its authenticity. When Jesus was born in Luke 2, verses 13 and 14, God gave mankind the testimony of a company of angels so that no one could miss the significance of the event. At his baptism in Matthew 3:16 and 17, God the Father declared audibly and pointedly that Jesus was his Son. After the crucifixion, signs were given so that everyone can confidently believe that the Son of God gave himself for the sins of the world. And this morning, I would like for us to focus upon one of these signs. To be specific, what was implied by the testimony of the earthquake? The day the rocks cried out. What was their message? Well, first, we see that the rocks said, "Do you understand who this is?" This earthquake, with the rocks splitting, proclaimed Christ to be the Son of God. The question that many took issue with throughout his arrest, trials, and crucifixion was, as the Jews put it in John 19:7, the fact that Jesus made himself out to be the Son of God. Matthew said that the evidence reached its climax in these signs and recorded that some witnesses were immediately convinced. Now the centurion and those who were with him keeping guard over Jesus, when they saw the earthquake and the things that were happening, became very frightened and said, "Truly, this was the Son of God." Matthew 27:54. Now who can look at this scene, as did the centurion, and not be persuaded that the one who was crucified was indeed the Son of God? The recording of these signs, as John put it, have been written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name, John 20:31. In the earthquake, the rocks cried out the importance of knowing who Jesus is. Secondly, the rocks said, "Understand what has happened here." The earthquake that split the rocks was a testimony that God's work had been done. At Mount Sinai, God used a quaking mountain to convey the message that he was present and to demonstrate the awesome significance of his giving of the law. Moses said now Mount Sinai was all in smoke because the Lord descended upon it in fire, and its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked violently, Exodus 19:18. And then in Psalm 68:8, it says that Sinai itself quaked at the presence of God, the God of Israel. Yes, God turned away from Jesus at the cross when he became sin for us, meaning he took the punishment of our sin. However, our ever-present God was at the cross. After Jesus had been nailed to the cross, the Jewish leaders breathed a sigh of relief. They must have said to one another, "With Rome's help, we have finally gotten rid of Jesus. We have achieved our purpose. Now we can go back to practicing our faith without the disturbance of Jesus." However, on the other side of the cross, we hear Peter saying in Acts 2:23, "This man was delivered over by the predetermined plan and the foreknowledge of God." In Peter's second sermon, he further said, "But the things which God announced beforehand by the mouth of all the prophets, that his Christ would suffer, he has thus fulfilled." Acts 3:18. The rocks declared that God's plan for the redemption of man had been fulfilled at the cross. The earthquake declared that Jesus had followed through with God's will. He had foretold what he was going to do, saying the Son of Man is going to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and he will be raised on the third day, Matthew 17:22 and 23. He had also spoken of his death and resurrection on several other occasions. He said in Matthew 20, verses 18 and 19, "Behold, we are going up to Jerusalem. The Son of Man will be delivered to the chief priests and scribes, and they will condemn him to death, and will hand him over to the Gentiles, to mock and scourge and crucify him, and on the third day he will be raised up." Then in Matthew 20 and verse 28, "The Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many." Yes, the rocks cried out to show the fulfillment of God's divine plan. Thirdly, the rocks said, "Understand what is going to happen from now on." When Jesus announced, "It is finished," he was declaring that he had completed God's plan for his earthly ministry. The sound of the rocks cracking apart added resounding affirmation to the Lord's implication that everything the prophets had foretold was now set in place. With Jesus' death, the new covenant had been made a reality. With his death, Jesus had completed what he had to do to become our great high priest. For we read in Hebrews chapter 9, beginning in verse 12, "He entered the holy place once for all, having obtained eternal redemption. For this reason, he is the mediator of a new covenant, so that since a death has taken place for the redemption of the transgressions that were committed under the first covenant, those who have been called may receive the promise of the eternal inheritance, for where a covenant is, there must of necessity be the death of the one who made it. According to God's plan, the death of Christ would usher in a new era, one over which Jesus would reign as Savior, Lord, and High Priest. Earthquakes have long punctuated God's dealings with man. He used one to mark his giving of the first covenant at Mount Sinai. He used one to signify the bringing of the second covenant at the cross, and he will use another at the end of time. This final earthquake will not hurt those who are hidden in God through Christ, but those who have rejected Christ will cry for the earthquake to hide them from the Lord. In highly figurative language, picturing the judgment of Rome and the judgment of all people at the end of time, the Apostle John wrote in Revelation 6, beginning in verse 12, "I looked when he broke the sixth seal, and there was a great earthquake, and the stars of the sky fell to the earth, as a fig casts its unripe figs when shaken by a great wind. The sky was split apart like a scroll when it's rolled up, and every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Then the kings of the earth, and the great men, and the commanders, and the rich, and the strong, and every slave and free man, hid themselves in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and to the rocks, Fall on us, hide us from the presence of him who sits on the throne, and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath has come, and who is able to stand?" Notice in this we see a picture of God's judgment coming upon those who are unrighteous. There are so many in the world around us today who deny the divinity of Jesus, who deny the very existence of God. But one day, Jesus says, and as we saw so vividly portrayed here in Revelation chapter 6, there will be a time when the days will be filled with terror. There will be a time when they will try to hide, a time when they will try to get away from the judgment of God. But as the Apostle Paul says, all must stand before the judgment seat of Christ and give an answer for how they've lived their life. There's nowhere that we can go, nowhere that we can hide, that God cannot see us. Even as it says, if the mountains and the rocks were to fall upon us, then God would still be able to see us. We would still be in the very presence of him who sits on the throne. And if we are not faithful to God, then we would still be subject to his wrath on the day of judgment. Just one short week before the crucifixion of Christ, Jesus came riding into the city of Jerusalem, and he had many disciples that were going along ahead of him, that were shouting and singing praises, saying, Blessed be the King that cometh in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest. And some of the Pharisees from among the multitude said unto him, Master, rebuke thy disciples. And he answered and said unto them, I tell you that, if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out. The entrance into Jerusalem that seemed to be such a triumphant entrance turned out to be a tragic entrance. And the death on the cross that seemed to be a tragic death turned out to be a triumphant death. For the stones did cry out. Oh yes, the people were silent. The disciples of Jesus had fled. They were not present at the cross. They fled away. The people were silent. But the rocks cried out in a testimony to the deity of the one who had been crucified. Friends, what we see is a sign of his victory, a sign of his triumph. Friends, we want to thank you for joining us for this study today. We pray that you will consider these things that we've discussed, and that God blesses you with a wonderful Lord's Day.